Week after week, we bring this live discussion to you on your YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, discussing issues and topics that are pertinent to you, that are important to you. And every week, I ask this one question to the attorney who's with me that week. Is it even important to hire an attorney? Listen, all the information is available on the internet. We all value the dollar amount that we spend and also the time, right? So why is it important to really hire an attorney? And for some cases where it's so obvious that you definitely need an attorney, how do you make most of an attorney-client relationship? How do you know that the attorney that you've hired is the best one for you out there in the market, who's gonna, represent you the right way and is going to work in your favor? This is exactly what we're going to be discussing in today's show. Hello there, and welcome to Thursdays Live with Chug. My name is Neha.Mahajan. I'm the Business Development and Outreach Manager here at Chug LLP, Attorneys and CPA. It's 2 o'clock Eastern Time, and it's Thursday, October 13. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Please allow me to welcome our attorney all the way from Texas, Attorney Anu Shah, who will be discussing how to make the most out of your attorney-client relationship. Hi there, Anu. Welcome.
Hi, it's so nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. Anu, and I'm pretty sure this is a question you get asked most often, Hey, Anu, I'm looking for an attorney. How do I know whether I really need an attorney? How do I know it's not an extra expense for me or the organization? And can I just avoid it? Can I not just do it by myself? Right? So I really want your expertise today, because most times businesses or even individuals, they're not even sure whether they want to hire an attorney until something unforeseeable happens. And then in most cases, as they say, it's probably a bit too late when an attorney is brought on board. Really, a lot of damage is already done. So what should people know about an attorney-client relationship?
There's a lot of things that go into that relationship. And one of the most important things is that it's a trust relationship. If I represent you as my client and someone is my client, what I tell them is my client and I will work out a scenario. We look at the facts that he or she brings into the office, and we work out the best possible route to figure out how do we want to get to our end result. There's a lot of things that go into that. And one of the basis of any good relationship is to have a big component of trust. And in this sense, there's a duty of confidentiality that I generally tell everybody about on my first meeting with them. And what that means as your attorney, I have a duty to maintain confidentiality about everything that you tell me for the most part. And there are a few exceptions, but for the most part, everything that you tell me. And I have that duty not only during the representation, but I have a duty to maintain confidentiality after we're done, whether that's a day after we're done, a month, a year, or whatever down the road. And I tend to repeat that a few times because we're not going to get much done unless my client trusts that I have his or her best interest at heart and that this representation actually is going to amount to something. So I probably sound like a bit of a broken record by the end of that initial meeting, but I say it a few times just to make sure that that is definitely out there. Now, I said there are a few exceptions, and they come up every now and then, but it's pretty rare. It could be a court order where I'm ordered to turn something over. But generally, most attorneys will at least contest that to some degree because our system here, our adversary system, says that what a client tells me is privileged. So generally, most lawyers are not going to turn that information over right away. So there's some, digging around and investigation that goes on into there. If it's a claim against an attorney, obviously that is an exception to the confidentiality rule. If a client tells me that he or she is going to commit a criminal act or some type of fraudulent act, then I have a duty to release that information. But as I said, those are very, very far and few between examples. So at the end of the day, confidentiality is a big component.
Right. You mentioned some of these cases, but in general, what is a I don't want to call it a trend really, but when people do reach out to you or really are in the market looking for an attorney, what kind of forces them to be, looking for an attorney in real sense?
There, it's a variety of circumstances. I think we would think, oh, it's because they've had an emergency come up or somebody's tried to sue them in the moment. But really, there's probably several different scenarios. It could be, and this is the best case scenario, before they start a project, whether they're thinking about forming a corporation or they're in the United States on a visa and thinking about a change in status. And so they might come to an attorney and say, this is what my future holds for me. This is what I foresee. How do I get to the end of the road on this? So if it's a business, we might sit down and talk about a partnership agreement, tax consequences. What kind of shares do you want to distribute among the directors? Things of that sort. And if it's an immigration issue, what's the best visa route to go? So that's one of the times when you might want to see an attorney.
Right. And those are a bit too obvious ones too, right? Because there's a situation that's already probably occurring in your life that
Mm-hmm.
you are. And sometimes people think that they might not even think, like you mentioned, if someone's thinking of forming a corporation, they might already have an idea. They might have probably done the basic paperwork themselves, right? And applied for a few, say, state licenses and stuff. And by the time they do bring an attorney on board, when the operations are already in full gear, don't you
Mm-hmm.
think it's slightly a bit too late to bring an attorney on board at that point in time?
There's a lot of, you are right that there are a lot of resources out there on the internet, the state law libraries, etc. What I've noticed is some people do, obviously, as an attorney, I think the best case scenario would be to bring me on at the outset. Let me understand your business, let me understand your goals, and then I can fashion the right way to go about things.
Right.
But there are an amazing number of very resourceful people out there who do the initial paperwork on their own, but then their business takes off and they want to go in a different direction, or they want to merge with another business, they want to add more partners. There's different things that are going on. So before launching into those different areas, it's a good idea to maybe consult with somebody and say, well, what's the state law in, say, California versus Texas on this? What about federal income tax regulation? How do I, what if I'm going international? Do you have somebody there that I can consult with? So there's a whole host of things, at the outset or throughout, all the way towards, growing your business, where I think an attorney would be very helpful.
Absolutely. And sometimes I guess businesses, when they're at that point, when they're expanding, they might not even know that there are possibilities that probably an attorney can guide them into the right direction.
There
Right?
really are. The obvious ones are always out there, but it might be that there's a tax consequence you haven't thought of. There
Right.
might be a different way to form an entity that might be more beneficial to your particular business. So I think that's where, if you bring in this trusted advisor, again, no one wants the overhead, no one wants the expense, but it's better to have it at a certain time at the outset rather than having to undo something down the road.
Right. And that's exactly why it's so important to have an attorney, a timely consult with an attorney, have an
I
attorney
think,
on board on your side already.
yes, I think that's the key, to do it timely.
Yeah. All right. Now, and this was actually going to be my next question, but I guess we've already kind of covered that. Why is it important to have a timely consult with an attorney? Do you want to add something to it?
Well, I think that's the basis, to timely consult somebody. And, just consulting might just be one meeting. It doesn't mean that you're going to have a full on representation. But sometimes just having that one meeting, an hour-long meeting, 30 minutes, whatever it might be, and perhaps you've used that attorney before for a prior reason. So you've already established that attorney-client relationship and the trust relationship. Therefore, you're going back to that person. So it might be something very quick, but it doesn't hurt to run that by somebody who might know, the hurdles and pitfalls of where you're trying to go to help you navigate.
Right. And I just want to mention here, we're 10 minutes into our discussion and we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So if you're joining us, please send us a comment. Tell us where you're joining us from. And if you have a question for us on any legal issue that you want to know about, feel free to send it to us in the comment section below, or send it to us to our email info@chuk.com. You'll see that information flashing every now and then on your screens. info@chugh.com. And a disclaimer, please, the discussion today is for informational purposes only, does not create an attorney-client relationship. And that's exactly what we're discussing today, the attorney-client relationship. Why is it important to have one? What should be your takeaway? How do you know whether the attorney that you are going to hire or are looking to hire is the right one for you? So, Anu, this one question comes by every single time. What should one talk to, or in terms of documentation, what should one take with them when they are really, they've set up that first consult, they know what they want to be talking about? Should they be taking something with them? Should they have a clear agenda? Should they have pointers with them? Should they take documents with them? Like, what would be your advice for someone who's coming to meet you for the first time?
But Neha, the short answer is take everything. Don't hold back. But basically, if you've got documents in your possession, take those with you. If you have video recordings, audio recordings, take all of that with you and present it at that meeting. So your attorney can either make copies or at least sort through it with you, in their presence. The other thing is, usually your meeting, you've got a few days, maybe a week or so before your first meeting, jot down some notes as you go. If you're thinking about something, jot down questions. It really makes a big difference in that initial meeting, and even afterwards. So have all your questions ready. And, anything else that you might want to discuss. So if it's a immigration case, talk about what your ultimate goal is. Is it to gain residency status here? Are you hoping to work here? Are you hoping to become a citizen eventually? Just so that person knows what your route is in the future. If it's a family law case, if you've got, if you're seeking help with a divorce matter, potentially, again, take the documents that you have, any type of mortgage paperwork, anything else, have those ready for your attorney. It will streamline the process and make things a lot easier.
Okay. All right. So the first meeting has happened, right? You've taken all the documents, you've discussed the agenda, you've made all notes. Based on that first meeting, what should one consider before agreeing to kind of sign a retainer with that particular attorney or lawyer?
Well, I think what a client needs to first consider is, do you have a good relationship with that attorney? So when I sit down with somebody, have I answered your questions? Have I presented myself as somebody who's knowledgeable about that subject?
Right.
Do you feel comfortable coming back to me and saying, okay, Anu, you answered 1 through 5, but now I've got some follow-up questions? Because I don't want a client going away and saying, she might be okay, but I don't know. I want them to have that confidence that I can take them through this case. The other thing is, do you feel comfortable coming back and telling me, I like part of your strategy, but I disagree with this other part? Because clients have a say-so in how their case proceeds. So I'm not here to cram a particular strategy down anybody's throat. I am here as an advisor, though, so I will be absolutely giving you my best judgment on how to go from point A to point B. But if you disagree with me, I want you to have that trust and comfort that you can come back and say, I don't really like this route. Let's rethink it. So that's where the trust, and again, trust isn't from that first meeting. It's gained over the course of a case, but it has to start somewhere.
So you brought a very amazing point here, Anu. When you agree to disagree, right?
Mm-hmm.
There could be times in your journey, so as to say, as a client with the attorney, where you might just completely disagree with the approach your attorney is taking. You're just not happy with the way they're handling the situation, the strategy. What would be your advice in that case? How should one go about it, especially from a client perspective? Because client here is calculating the dollar value, right? They're really thinking of all the money that they're paying by the minute, literally, to the attorney to get that advice and strategy in place.
Right, right. And what I would say is, if you start disagreeing with a strategy or an approach or even an answer to a question, contact the attorney right away. Don't let this simmer and you wonder. Meanwhile, the attorney is, spending more time on other aspects of your case. Contact your lawyer right away and be open and honest about it. Maybe that attorney had a reason that they haven't laid out properly for you. On the other hand, maybe the client has information that hasn't been communicated to the lawyer. So the client's operating under one set of facts, the lawyer's operating under another. And what there needs to be is some better communication. And third, you regret when this happens, but sometimes it's just not the right relationship. And at that point, sometimes it's a matter of shaking hands, terminating the relationship, and the client decides to hire another attorney. But
Right.
generally speaking, before it gets to that point, I think communication is important.
Okay, all right. And my next question is going to be about specifics on the right time to hire an attorney. I know we did discuss
Right.
it in a little bit
Right.
earlier in our discussion today, but I really, if you could summarize it for the audience who's joining us right now, and who are wondering what we're talking about, right? If you could summarize it for them in maybe pointers on what should be an actual right time to really hire an attorney.
Right. Well, it depends on the type of case you have. So, obviously, we've already discussed one of the times to hire an attorney could be at the outset when you're thinking about establishing a company. Perhaps you're thinking about an international adoption in a family case where you need to know the rules of international adoptions, what the rule in another country might be. It's obviously something not that you wouldn't just jump into. You want to know the process so you do it properly. So you consult with somebody to make sure you know all the steps along the way, let's say.
Right.
Another time, though, would be when a situation arises. Could be that somebody is arrested. They need an attorney right away to figure out how to navigate the criminal justice system. It could be a family law case with somebody to serve with a divorce petition. You don't want to sit on that. You need somebody's guidance to answer that petition and go forward with whatever this lawsuit might require. And then obviously, once a particular issue is settled, once a particular matter is settled, maybe you have formed that corporation, the company, you're very happy about it, things are going great. You don't want to lose that relationship though, because you might want to expand. You might want to dissolve that company and start something different. So it's nice to already have somebody who knows how you do business and your mindset to be able to jump in there and help you right away.
Right, but then, some people might just say, hey, everything's going hunky dory, everything is going all right. Why should I even be spending, my time, my energy that I could probably spend in sales and all the money, all the dollar amount onto hiring an attorney, right? So what do you say to those people?
Well, I mean, I do. What I'm saying is, once your corporation is set up, obviously it's your job then to run. A client wants to run the business
Right.
the way he or she wants to. And so, what I would say though is, you still maintain that attorney-client relationship in case something does happen. None of us gets up in the morning expecting something to happen in this regard. But if it does, you've got an attorney right there that you can pick up the phone and contact and have somebody come in there and help you navigate whatever issue might have come up. It doesn't hurt also to have somebody to know, as I mentioned earlier, the nature of your business and how it's set up, just to enable that legal advice to be based on prior encounters with the client.
Right. So, you mentioned in our discussion throughout today, you mentioned a few cases. You mentioned about immigration, you mentioned about
Mhm.
business formations, you mentioned about family law, divorce cases, and stuff. But I think one thing that people kind of overlook is, either the living will or creating a trust or an
Mhm.
estate, right? When should people actually start thinking about these things? Like when
You
you're
know,
in your 20s, or you're nearing retirement and you're like, hey, I think I need to figure something out.
well, I think it doesn't hurt for everyone to have a will, and that's probably, um, certainly when you're young or you're single, you don't have children, it may not be the foremost thing on your mind, and it might not even be that urgent at that point. But I do think once you get married, once you have children, it becomes more important. And I there are so many individuals who say, well, that's down the road. I don't want to really think about that right now. Or thinking about death makes me uncomfortable. And, I tell people who tell me that, I said, you're not the only one. Trust me. So many people think that. But most lawyers can make you feel comfortable with this process. And as I've told my friends and family members, think of it as just signing a document. Nothing is going to happen just because you sign that document, but what it will do eventually is give you some peace of mind. It gives your heirs a guide map, basically a roadmap as to what to do with your estate after you've passed. But once you have it, it's signed, it's done. You give it over to your executor. Uh, you keep the original, and it's something that just it's think of it as paperwork. Unfortunately, it's not pleasant paperwork, but once it's done, it does make you feel better. And
Right.
it
And
gives you a way to plan your future and to
yeah,
take care of, your children and your other heirs.
yeah, no, makes sense. And most of us don't want to think that far out in our lives,
Sure.
right? I mean, you do
Sure.
make those plans for 5 years down the line, 10 years down the
Right.
line, but
Right.
creating a trust or a will doesn't really fall into that planning, right?
Yes.
So I guess when you are thinking of settling down, or even when you're single, right, and you have some even if you don't have a liability and you are on the way of planning, I think it's a good idea to just figure out what you're going to do you know
Exactly. And it could be a very simple will at that point. Obviously, if you don't have children, you don't need to, worry about guardians should you pass, before they become a legal age. You're not worried about perhaps setting up a trust for them. You're not worried about other, consequences should you pass earlier than your children do. But
Right.
it doesn't hurt, if you are so that organized and that forward thinking and you are young, it doesn't hurt to have a very simple will so that your property is disposed the way you want it disposed. And so, what I often tell people is this is about you taking control instead of
Right.
it being disposed according to the laws that are in existence in the state for
Right.
what's called succession, intestate succession without a will. This basically tells you, hey, these are my instructions, and my property should be distributed the way I say so. So it is a way of taking control about your future.
Which is great. You're
Of
really just
course.
creating a roadmap when you're not around,
Yes. Yes.
right?
And
Okay.
substantially easing the burden on the people who are left to handle your estate. You're just basically that you're giving them instructions to fulfill, but they don't have to figure out all of this on their own.
All right. So we discussed about how and when you need an attorney in your life. We discussed about some of the obvious, scenarios like immigration, criminal, God forbid, if you get into one, some sort of an arrest, family law, if you're served a divorce notice, or there are other family related complications that you want to deal with. Definitely think of estate or will, creating a trust, estate planning, and then the obvious, when you're thinking of creating a corporation or even thinking of setting up a business, not expanding it. That comes later. Obviously, you need an attorney for that. But even when you're thinking of setting up a business, how do you go about it? There might be certain areas that you might not even think about. And here's
Right.
this expert who can guide you through, who can tell you that, hey, you're probably not thinking about this, but I think you should, because the way you planned your business, I think this would be a good idea. I'll give you an example, Anu. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had someone who'd reached us out from the UK. They wanted to expand in the US, right? And they already have a thriving business. They want to open up a new business here in the US, and they had a certain set criteria based on the research that they had done, and they were just looking from that myopic view, right? But when they got on a consultation with one of the attorneys here, and the attorney gave them not one, but two different choices, which would not only make sense for their business, but also help them in long term, they were very thankful for it, because obviously the online research could not have given them that kind of that kind of a purview, right? That's why you need specialists or subject matter experts. So attorneys are those
Yeah.
subject matter experts. You might think of them as an expense, but they are not. They actually work in your favor. So I guess there needs to be a narrative, change a narrative around that.
Well, I think what you can also say is, say this individual did go down the path that he or she had researched. Maybe that would have been fine, but in the future, that could have caused an issue had they not thought of all these other consequences. And really, that just takes away from the time you're spending on your business, and obviously the expense to undo one path and start over again somewhere else. And so, again, no one likes to spend that money initially, but sometimes it can save you from a lot bigger expense down the road.
Very well said. And with that, I would like to wrap this discussion today. I want to thank you, Anu, for being, so kind and generous with your time, and also, discussing it in such a great detail. Because, I think one thing that happens is attorneys do not take out time to explain why their services are needed. People just and there's a fear in the society that, oh my god, I don't want to get involved with an attorney. But it doesn't have to be that fearful, right? It's just another business transaction that is important for you, depending on which where you are in your life. At what stage are you, right? And an attorney is that friend, really, that you can that can guide you on how to take your life plan further.
I think so. And I think it goes back to the words of communication and a trusted advisor.
Yeah.
So somebody that you can come in, talk about your issues, what's going on, and know that what you're saying is confidential, and that attorney has this duty to zealously represent you. And if you really understand that and are comfortable with that relationship, I think it can really benefit the client in the long run with whatever their goals are.
All right. So that brings us to the end of our discussion today. I want to thank you for joining us today. And if you have any questions and you're watching us as a recorded version, info@chugh.com. That's info@chugh.com. And we'll be happy to, give you a consult, speak with you, obviously in a confidential way, and, help you with whatever situation life has thrown at you, whether it's good or bad. So with that, I would like to say goodbye, and I will see you next week with another topic and another pertinent discussion. If you have a suggestion in the meantime for us on a topic that you would like for us to discuss about, send it to us, info@chugh.com. Until next time, I want to say goodbye.